Story time. When I was a child, my family and I moved into a big old 2-story house. Both my parents worked, so I was often home alone when I came home from school. One evening when I came home, the house was still dark. I called out for my mum just in case she was home and heard her sing-song voice reply from upstairs. I called her again as I climbed the stairs to see which room she was in and again heard the same response. We were decorating the house at the time and I didn't quite know my way around the maze of rooms yet, but I knew she was in one of the far ones right down the hall. Just as I reached for the handle of the door to let myself in the room, I heard the front door downstairs open and my mother call out for me. I jumped back terrified and ran down the stairs to her, but as I glanced back, the door to the room slowly opened a crack, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something staring back at me. Was this a case of badly behaved children or something else? One morning, I was with my mum in the bathroom of our house while she was getting ready. She was acting a little distant, so I asked her if everything was okay, and she told me about something that had happened the night before. At about 2 a.m, she had been woken up by a strange noise, so she got up and went to see where it was coming from. It seemed to be coming from the bathroom, and as she walked in, she saw a hairdryer plugged in and turned on in the middle of the floor. She thought it was strange, but that it was probably just one of the kids, and went back to bed. About an hour later, she was woken up again by the same sound, but this time when she went to check, it was coming from downstairs. Once again, the hairdryer was in the middle of the floor, but this time in the downstairs bathroom. As she's telling me this story, I turn to look at the closet in her bathroom, and as I do, the entire light bulb smashes into pieces. Story time. My sister and I were staying in an old hotel in the middle of rural Montana. The building had been in use since the 1800s, and it was one of my sister's favourite places. But the night we stayed there, I was kept up all night by someone pacing around on the hardwood floor in the room above ours. The next morning, I asked my sister how she'd managed to get any sleep, and she said she hadn't heard a sound. Besides, the rooms above ours were carpeted and empty. The hotel staff confirmed this, and also mentioned that the upstairs of the building had once been used as an old ballroom. This house was so haunted, nobody could live there. In the 1870s, a family living in Surrency, Georgia, started experiencing terrifying paranormal activities in their home. They reported witnessing objects soaring across rooms, hearing laughter and crying, and seeing red eyes staring into their house. Food was thrown from their plates, and the utensils were twisted into unusable shapes. The townspeople speculated that these occurrences were cries for help from spirits who thought the family would be able to save them. On the day the family decided to finally leave the house, a fire iron allegedly floated up and started beating one of the sons in the head. No one was ever brave enough to live in the house again, and the building went up in flames in 1925. Story time. One evening, my wife and I had picked up our daughter from her friend Sally's birthday party. We brought her home and put her into bed. But later that night, after I'd gone to bed, I heard her come into our room. She came up to the edge of the bed and started pulling up my shirt sleeve. "Guess how old I'm going to be next month?" she said. "I don't know. How old?" I replied, still half asleep. She smiled at me and held up 4 fingers. My wife and I have been up with her for almost 8 hours pleading with her, but she still refuses to tell us where she got them.
Ever see a red car, don't do what he did. Once there was a man in Mexico who took a night shift at work. After work, as he was walking home, he saw a bright red car. The red car pulled up in front of him and 3 women were inside. They asked if he needed a ride home, and because he thought they were beautiful and harmless young women, he agreed. The next morning, his wife realized he never came back home. She called his work and they didn't know where he was either, so she called the police. The police then went to his workplace, which is where he was last seen, and began searching. A few miles away, they found his body. It was lying on the side of the road with strange symbols carved all over. The 3 women in the red car turned out to be witches who traveled the road looking for men, usually those who wander the streets late at night. When they found these men, they would entice them to get into their car with them, promise him they could fulfill all of his dreams, then begin their dark occult ritual where he would be sacrificed to the devil. But the most disturbing part of the story is that the bright red car that these witches were driving were painted from the blood of all of their victims. This is why you should be careful who you believe. Once there was a girl named Dani who lived with her parents, but one day she came home and found something terrifying. She went to the kitchen to get some water, but dropped the glass and screamed in terror. On the floor, she saw the body of her mother. Then her father burst into the room. He said, "Dani, listen carefully. Your mom was trying to run away and abandon us. We got in a fight. She fell. It was an accident. I'm so sorry." Dani was in shock, but nothing could have prepared her for what her father said next. "We had to get rid of the evidence ourselves. If the neighbors ask questions, just say she ran away with another man." Dani ran upstairs to her room in tears. That's when she found something strange. On her bed was a suitcase with all her clothes folded inside. On top of the suitcase was a note. It said, "Dani, I packed your things. We need to leave. Your father has gone insane." This is why you should never abandon your old toys. Once there was an old toy store, and on the top shelf in the back of this toy store was a doll. Every day this doll watched as people came into the store, but no one ever paid any attention to it, until one day its dreams came true. One girl named Lena came into the store and bought the doll, but things quickly took a terrifying turn. Although Lena liked the doll in the beginning, she quickly grew sick of it. Days and months passed and she ended up abandoning the doll like a piece of trash, until eventually Lena got into a fight with her mother when she said, "I never wanted the stupid doll anyways." But of course, she could have never known the terrifying consequences this would lead to. One night, as Lena slept in her bed, she heard a creaking noise. Then the noise moved closer and closer, until Lena's mother heard a scream coming from her bedroom. When she came in, she saw Lena on the ground, but it was how she looked that terrified her mother the most. Lena's arms and legs were bent in strange positions, like a disjointed doll. Her mouth was sewn shut, but she looked desperately up at her mother, then to her desk. And on her desk was a note that said, "Now you know what it's like to be a doll." Have you ever eavesdropped on someone else's conversation? For one woman who was a psychiatrist, her eavesdropping on her neighbors would lead to something terrifying. So this woman moved into an apartment and noticed that there was a family of 3 living next to her. They were a married couple in their 60s and their son who was about 30. The son, however, barely left the house, and the psychiatrist would often hear the mother yelling and the couple arguing. Eventually, the son wouldn't leave the house for years, but one day everything changed. The father knocked on the psychiatrist's door looking devastated. He said his family needed her help, so she went with him to their apartment where their mother was waiting. Then the couple led her to their son's room, where the mother banged on the door and said, "We're coming in." The son was still in bed sleeping. Then the mother started yelling, "Are you going to sleep forever, you lazy good for nothing?" and grabbed a golf club and began beating the son sleeping beneath the covers. The psychiatrist was shocked and pulled the mother off of her son. But that was not nearly the most terrifying part. When the psychiatrist tried to check if the son was hurt, she pulled back the covers and saw a mummified corpse. Then the father said, "It's my wife who needs help. This has been going on for years and I can't take it anymore." Never play this game with your friends. Once there was a group of girls who heard about the game Baby Blue. They didn't believe in it but thought they could scare their friend Laura. So they sent Laura into a bathroom by herself. She turned off the lights, closed the door, and put her arms out as if to hold a baby. Then started chanting Baby Blue 13 times. What happened next cannot be explained. Laura felt a heavy weight in her arms. Then she felt the weight in her arms scratching her. She was terrified and didn't know what to do. She wanted to drop it, but she was afraid of what might happen if she did, so she froze, and the weight grew heavier and heavier. Suddenly, she saw a woman in the bathroom mirror with a twisted look on her face. She screamed in terror. When her friends heard her scream, they tried to open the door, but it was locked. When they finally opened the door, they found Laura on the floor. Her eyes had been scratched out. They tried to move her body, but they couldn't, because something large and invisible was pinning her to the ground. This is why when something seems too good to be true, it probably is. Once a newly married couple was searching for houses they could buy, and they came across a beautiful house with a suspiciously cheap price. They couldn't see anything wrong with the house, so they just thought they got lucky. They moved in quickly. But one day the husband was walking down the hallway when he found a red crayon on the floor. He thought maybe the previous residents had left it behind, so he just threw it out. The next day he found another red crayon lying in the exact same place. This time he asked his wife about it. His wife looked shocked. She confessed that every day since they've moved in, she's been finding red crayons in the hallway too. Then the husband tried to tap on the wall at the end of the hallway and heard a hollow sound. He began peeling off the wallpaper and found a sliding door behind it. It was as if someone had tried everything they could to keep anyone from finding this door. He tried to open it, but the door was nailed shut. Then he took a hammer and pried off the nails one by one. He opened the door to find a small room with words scribbled in red crayon all over the walls. It said, "Mommy, I'm sorry, let me out," over and over. This is why you should never answer a call from your own number. Tim was woken up by his phone constantly ringing, but he ignored it and went back to sleep. That day he went to work, pulled out his phone, and saw that he had a missed call from his own number. He thought this must be a coincidence. He went to hang out with his friend and another call came. This time he picked up and heard his own voice repeating whatever he'd say back to him, until he was about to hang up. The voice said, "You're going downhill." He felt very uneasy but tried to let it go. The next morning at work, his number called again, but this time he felt terrified. So he made up an excuse and drove home as fast as he could. He knew deep inside some kind of a confrontation was coming. As soon as he got home, he saw his car pull into the driveway, and he saw himself get out of the car with a terrifying smile on his face. His doppelganger had stalked him and found him. Tim barricaded himself in his bedroom, but his doppelganger was banging on the door. He knew he was almost out of time. That's when he had one last idea. He pulled out his phone and called himself, and he heard his own voice reply, "How are you calling me from this number? Who are you?" If you ever see a red car,
This is why you should never try using a Ouija board. My friends and I decided to play with a Ouija board after work in our office and spoke to a girl named Quinn. She didn't say much but seemed friendly enough, but when I mentioned my girlfriend, she got super mad and protective of me. When it got to 2 a.m, we said goodbye to her, but about a week later, in the middle of the night, the office block that we worked in burnt down. It creeped us all out, so a week later we used the Ouija board again near a lake and asked for Quinn. When we got through to her, we asked if she started the fire, to which she responded, yes. About 2 weeks later, I was driving to my girlfriend's house with the board in the back of the truck. I didn't know it at the time, but my girlfriend was in fact cheating on me. But I guess Quinn knew because I lost control of the truck and flipped it upside down. When the cops arrived to make sure I was okay, they reminded me what road I was on. Route 666, Virginia. You guys asked for it, here's another story time. One night, a woman was driving home late at night from dinner with some of her friends. As she was driving, she noticed a pair of headlights in her rearview mirror approaching the car. As this car pulled up behind her, she glanced and saw the driver switch the turn signal on, as if it was about to pass, before suddenly swerving back behind her and pulling up dangerously close to her, flashing its lights. The frightened woman struggled to keep her eyes on the road and finally turned onto the exit. Through every stoplight and turn, the car followed her, still flashing its lights until she pulled into her driveway. She figured her only hope was to make a dash into the house and call the police, but as she jumped out of the car, so did the driver of the car behind her, and he screamed, "Lock the doors and call 911. When the police arrived, it was revealed that as the man in the car had pulled up behind her, his headlights illuminated the car and he saw a silhouette of a man in the back seat reaching to grab the woman. This is why you should never leave your house unlocked. Part 1. When I was about 12 years old, I lived in Kansas. Both my parents were out and I was home alone with my 2 dogs.